Happy Tuesday. Happy on sale day. I'm here with Jim Acosta. Congratulations.
Thank you. Feels great to be here.
Yeah, so today is the day that the enemy of the people, a dangerous time to tell the truth in America, is on sale. And you can get a signed copy. All you have to do is go to premiercollectibles.com/Acosta. And we're going to begin signing books, and I'm going to talk to Jim. We've got a lot of your questions waiting in the queue. I'll ask a few questions, and I'll make sure to get to all of your questions. So first of all, I'm Lisa Sharkey from HarperCollins. You're Jim Acosta, Chief White House Correspondent from CNN. You and I decided to work together on this book last year.
That's right.
I thought you were a badass.
Are we allowed to say that here?
Yes, we're on Facebook. We can say badass.
Great.
You were at the White House, and I saw you have an exchange with Sarah Sanders,
right.
And she refused to say that the press is not the enemy of the people.
That's right, and I remember you reaching out to me and saying, hey, Jim, would you be interested in writing a book about your experience covering the White House? And I said, well, you know, as it turns out, funny you should say that, I've been thinking about this for some time, and working on some stuff here and there.
Yeah, you had some pages.
I had some pages, and you know, I've been concerned about this for some time, and it goes back to the campaign when we would follow Donald Trump all over the country, and he would refer to the press as the dishonest media, the disgusting news media. He'd call us liars and scum, and you'd see thousands of people at these rallies yelling at us. And he carried that act right into the administration, calling us fake news and the enemy of the people. And so what I hope with this book is that people will, you know, maybe hit the pause button a little bit, think deeply about what's happening in our country and whether or not we should have the press referred to in this fashion. It's really important what we do. I'm not just patting myself on the back. I have a whole team of colleagues at CNN.
I mean, there's no
across
patting on the back in this book. This book is a deep inside. It's a fly on the wall of what it's like to be CNN's Chief White House Correspondent in the age of Trump.
Right.
But I just want people to know a little bit about your background. I think it's important that they understand that you are the son of a Cuban immigrant. You grew up in the D.C. area. Tell us about your heritage and how that plays into your role as somebody reporting during these difficult times.
Yeah, my dad is a Cuban immigrant, came to this country in 1962, 3 weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you know, his experience fleeing a communist country always instilled in me an appreciation for, you know, the freedoms that we have in this country, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and so on. And you know, when you hear things like, you know, the press is the enemy of the people and fake news, it reminds me of some of the experiences that people go through back in Cuba. When I went to Cuba in 2016, I had a chance to ask Raul Castro about his country's practice of jailing political prisoners. He couldn't believe his ears that I was asking this question. A Cuban reporter couldn't get away with something like that, but a Cuban American can. And so that story's in this book too. I hope people take some time to reflect on this and think, you know, what we have here in this country is pretty special, that we can do this.
Freedom.
We can speak truth to power and hold our leaders accountable.
And I think what people also need to understand is, you know, you may have become sort of a household name in the age of Trump, but you've been covering presidents, you've been a reporter for decades. So take us backwards a little bit through the history of your job as a journalist.
Yeah, I started working behind the scenes, answering the phones at Channel 5 in D.C. One of my heroes, Sam Donaldson, his wife worked at the station at the time, and you know, he would call the station, and I would be on the desk answering the phones, and hold on, Mr. Donaldson, give me just a minute, I'll find your wife for you, and that sort of thing. And
Jan Smith,
Jan Smith,
yes,
that's
I
right.
remember her.
Worked in local news, started in Knoxville, Tennessee, went to Dallas, Texas, Chicago, then worked for CBS News, and then ultimately CNN. I've covered 4 presidential campaigns. This is the second administration that I've covered, and so I think I've seen a lot and done a lot, and have a lot of experience to draw upon to, you know, essentially weave this story together about what we've been going through for the last 3 years.
And you also grew up in the Washington, D.C. area.
I did, yeah.
And your dad worked in a grocery store.
Yeah, parents are blue collar. My dad worked in grocery stores. My mom worked in the restaurant business. You know, as I say in this book, I get a lot of my strength, I think, from my mom. She raised me as a single mom, all the way back in the 1970s. That wasn't easy. And, you know, when I go to Trump rallies, I sometimes tell folks there, I think I might get you
more than you think.
More than you think, maybe as well or better than the president that you came to see.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you talk about in the book how growing up, your mom read the Washington Post cover to cover every single day.
Every day. Did it this morning.
And today, there's a fantastic review of The Enemy of the People in the Washington Post, and your mom
took a picture
pictures
of it
and
sent it to me.
And texted it to you. It's very cute.
She sent me a text. Oh, I already saw the story in the Post.
Oh, she must be so
job.
proud.
Yeah.
So I just want to get to some of our great questions.
Sure.
We have Sandra from the Washington, D.C. area, Richmond, Virginia.
Great.
She says, you maintain such dignity and decorum when people attempt to demean, degrade, or silence you. Do you survive these situations by white-knuckling it, or are you simply being true to your authentic self by refusing to take the bait?
Well, there's this whole discussion about taking the bait and that sort of thing. I look at it as we're covering the news, and so we can't ignore the fact that the president puts out these tweets that are sometimes factually challenged, and this has aggravated the president and his team and his supporters from time to time, that, we have to be fact checkers in real time. And the Washington Post revealed that, he has made approximately 10,000 false or misleading statements since coming into office. And, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just let that slide? Can you imagine what life would be like if over the last 2 years we never fact-checked any of these claims? What would be our sense of the truth and reality today?
Well, then we'd be in Cuba.
We would
be able to ask the questions.
In a situation like that, exactly. That's right.
Yeah, so as CNN's chief White House correspondent, Karen from Decatur, Alabama wants to know, what were your first thoughts when your White House press pass was revoked, and who did you phone first for guidance?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. Well, the first thing I did was I called our news desk back in the bureau in D.C., and I said, I don't think I'm going to make my Anderson Cooper live shot.
Oh, gosh.
Because I can't get into the White House. They took away my press pass. I thought it was important at that moment to document what was going on. So I pulled out my iPhone, I started recording video, because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. Are they going to arrest me?
Yeah, and that's in the book, too, that whole story.
And I talk about that in the book, because, this is such an unprecedented situation. I thought, well, you know what? Maybe not everybody will believe what I say about this. So if I document it, then we've got proof.
Yeah, or someone might try to mess around with that video.
Somebody might doctor a video, for example.
Yeah,
That's
we'll get
exactly
to that in a moment. Keep signing. I'm going to keep prompting you because we got a lot of books to sign.
Okay, yeah.
Because the people, if you're watching, these books can be for you or for someone you love. And Father's Day is coming up like just in a few days.
Absolutely.
So it's important to order something important for your dad that you guys can talk about. So is there a chance to change the tide? This is from Charles in Dundalk, Maryland.
Oh, great, right outside Baltimore.
How do we recover from a potential second Trump presidency?
Well, I'm not, we're not here to, endorse this candidate over that candidate. If I did that, CNN would say, Jim, we can't have you covering the White House anymore. But what I am telling folks to do, and it doesn't matter which side of the political aisle you're on, is, try to think deeply about this situation that we're in right now as a country. Do we really want to be in a situation where the federal government, which is the President of the United States, is referring to the press as the enemy of the people? Do we want to be in a situation where we just don't have as much faith in one another as we used to, where people on the conservative side can only believe the news from the conservative side of the media spectrum and so on? I'd love for us to get back to a point where we have a little more faith in one another, and I think that is one of the ways out of this, really. And it may sound a little corny or Pollyannish, but I do think it's as simple as that.
I mean, as a newsman and myself as a journalist for a long time before becoming a book publishing professional, it was never a thought in the newsroom, how do you make a story in one direction or another? It was always,
I've never been in a...
What is the story, and how do you source it, and how do you balance it?
That's right.
And so if you have a president who is calling you fake news, that doesn't mean that there's one iota of truth to that. I mean, you cover your stories, you have your sources, you double source them, and you move on with your day. I mean, it's, you're running fast when you're working for a network like CNN. You're doing your live shots. You're not sitting around figuring out how can I tilt this in one direction or the other, but you have to report the facts.
And getting back to that gentleman's sentiment, I'll tell you this. One of the fascinating parts about the book, I hope for folks, is when I take folks through the rallies and what it's like being in those rallies and talking to various Trump supporters. And I'll never forget one of the rallies in Florida right before the midterms. This man came up to me, his name was Merlin, and he says, Jim, I needed to find you at one of these rallies. I was one of the guys that was flipping you off at that rally in Tampa earlier in the year. And he said to me, I felt really bad about that. And so I wanted to come to you today and say, listen, I don't hate you. I understand what you have to do for a living, and just wanted to say that. And that touched me almost more than anything I'd ever run across in my profession, because it was an acknowledgement that, yes, people are really wrapped up in what's happening right now, but after thinking about it and giving it some deep thought, Merlin had this epiphany, like, wow, Jim is my fellow American. We can't treat our fellow Americans this way. And so
you're as
one of my favorite parts.
patriotic as anyone. This is not about who's a patriot and who isn't a patriot.
Exactly.
DR from Lauderdale, Minnesota wants to know, is there any way our democracy can survive?
Oh, goodness, yes.
Oh, yes,
yes, of course. Now, I understand where this person's coming from. It can get a little unsettling from time to time, but we've been through a lot in this country. And, as I write in the book, when Walter Cronkite went to Vietnam, that was a pretty tumultuous time in this country. And people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be offering your observations and your views on things. Walter Cronkite from CBS News went to Vietnam, came back, said the war cannot be won. And that was when Lyndon Johnson said, well, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost middle America. And this was the most trusted man in America who did the news, was all about the news, but he went to Vietnam and came back and thought he had to report on what he saw, not both sides. Well, it might be one or it might not be one. It was his view, his observation after taking everything in, talking to the generals, that we were stuck in a quagmire. And it was one of the pivotal moments in that conflict.
And speaking of conflicts, you were on the beaches of Normandy for the 75th anniversary of the landing there just a few days ago.
Yeah.
Let's put that all into context of what's going on now.
Yeah, to me, it was just one of the, best experiences for me as a reporter to go to Normandy. It was my second time there. I was there when Obama was there in 2015 or 2014, 2015. And just being there with those veterans 75 years later after they stormed
really
the beaches
amazing.
of Normandy. And that was really the beginning of the turning of the tide in World War II. That was the beginning of the liberation of France and the rest of Europe. And at that time, my goodness, going back to this person asking whether our democracy will survive, people were asking at that time, will our world survive?
Yeah.
And if it weren't for the bravery and courage of those young men so many years ago, we would not be doing this book signing right now, that's for sure.
And you said that while you were in France, while you're in that small town in Normandy, there were patriotic American songs being played, and that you felt so proud to be an American that night.
That's right. And when I go to France and when I go all over the world, and I write about this in the book, I mentioned this, that I talk to diplomatic officials from various U.S. allies. They're concerned about what's happening in the United States, and they want to know, Jim, what's going on with this administration? What's happening? People around the world are concerned about what's happening in the U.S., but when I go and talk to folks abroad, I was at Oxford earlier this year, I always tell folks, don't lose faith in the United States of America.
Of course not. And as a matter of fact, people wrote articles because they said that you praised President Trump for his speech. Yeah, you're reporting. If the guy makes a good speech, you're going to talk about it. And
that's
if his feet need to be held to the fire because he's not answering a question, do you ever feel badly about asking a tough question?
I think you have to ask the question, no matter what the situation is. And listen, if we didn't do that, a lot of folks are always asking me, what's it like when folks on the right come after you, certain conservative media outlets come after you? It's not always pleasant, I'll grant you that, but I always also think about the folks at home who are like, wait a minute, I want this question to be asked. Somebody asked the question.
That's what I find one of the most interesting things in the book is that you talk about the fact that just because you're not going to get an answer doesn't mean the question doesn't deserve to be heard.
That's right.
And you've got to keep the camera rolling, and you've got to put the question out there, because if you don't put the question out there, you don't get people thinking about what the question ought to be. And that takes me to Janet Rivera from Billings, Montana. She wants to know.
Billings, all right. I was there for a Trump rally.
I'm sure you had a great time. Does it anger you, as it does her, that the rest of the press corps doesn't stand up to this administration more?
Well, a lot of folks in the press corps do. I might quarrel a little bit with the question. And what we've seen a lot more of, and I write about this in the book, one of my favorite moments from my entire professional career was when we had that news conference and after the midterms and Trump was coming after me and my my friend Peter Alexander from NBC stood up and said, "Mr. President, Jim works his butt off. He's a diligent, hardworking reporter. Let's move on to the next question." And it was one of those moments where a fellow member of the press, not even somebody who worked for my news outlet,
right,
was standing up for me. And I think that really struck a chord for a lot of people.
And also in the book, you will learn that you then run into Peter Alexander and you sort of man hug.
We had a little
nice
bro hug there
on
the way out the door.
Because you felt so personally, sort of emotionally supported by him. And, reporters are humans. People are trying to go, this is your job. You are paid to do this.
That's right.
So I think it's important for people to realize this is...
I think we could probably show more solidarity from time to time. I mean, during my press pass situation, one of the really striking things was we had all of these news organizations standing behind us, including Fox. Fox was with us. And it was one of those rare moments in our business where everybody was on the same team. Mm-hmm. And as I write in the book, the folks at the White House Correspondents Association warned the White House and said, you know what? You are going to unify the press corps in this situation, and that's exactly what happened.
Absolutely.
Their warnings did not go heeded.
Another important thing that I think is good to point out in this book is that you're going to meet some of the characters, whether it's Sean Spicer or Sarah Sanders or Reince Priebus.
Right.
A lot of people are going to come to life from behind the scenes. So tell us a little bit about Sarah Sanders in the beginning, and then all the way at the end of the book, how things come full circle.
Yeah, Sarah, she was Sean's deputy there for a while. So Sarah would be the one who would say, "Oh, Sean's had a tough day. Sorry, he snapped at you." That sort of thing. We could have drinks with her on the press charter and so on. And by the time we got to my whole press pass incident, she's tweeting out a doctored video of my whole situation in the press conference that day.
But she did backtrack on that. She did
have to backtrack on that, and the administration completely threw that out the window in their court case with us. But it's one of those things that I've seen. I've noticed this metamorphosis over time with Sarah. I don't hold anything personal against her. She's got a job to do. Sean Spicer, as I write in the book, there were times when I felt really badly for him that he was put in this situation. That time when we all went to Rome and he didn't get to meet the Pope because the president's team excluded him from the entourage that was going in to meet the Pope.
And they knew that he would have wanted to meet the Pope perhaps more than anybody else there.
Sean is one of the biggest Catholics in the administration. So I felt bad for him there, but as I write in the book, these are public servants. They work for the American people. They don't work for any particular president. They work for the presidency.
Right.
And one of the lingering, I think, lessons to be learned from all of this is that when people go to work for the administration, go to work for the federal government, they have to remind themselves who they're working for. They're working for the taxpayers. They're working for the people. These aren't employees at the Trump organization. They're our employees. And and I think that's something that I think they lost sight of from time to time. But when you talk about characters coming to life, real quickly, I'll just say one of the more surprising things in the book was how Kellyanne Conway said to me, she regretted saying alternative facts.
And she goes on the record in this book. This is not what someone told you about Kellyanne. This is you and Kellyanne talking.
We had an interview.
And you can read what she says in the pages of this book.
That's right.
Allison from Noonan, Georgia says, having now gone through the process, do you think you'd like to write another book in the future?
Well, let me get over. We had a lot of fun. That was great. And CNN was extremely supportive, and it's been an amazing experience. I'll take a little break from this one and collect my thoughts, and who knows down the road, perhaps so.
You never know.
Yeah,
you never know.
But I appreciate your interest.
I just want to remind y'all to please go to premiercollectibles.com/Acosta, ACOSTA. And you can get yourself a signed copy. You can get one for your dad for Father's Day or for yourself. It's always a nice collectible item to have. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Chandni from Chantilly, Virginia. Holding truth to power. Has it been the toughest time in your career to do so?
I would say yes. I've had some tough assignments over the years. As I write in the book, I covered Hurricane Katrina. That was a tough assignment.
And 9/11.
Covered the aftermath of 9/11. That was a tough assignment. The Iraq War. And 4 presidential campaigns, we had our share of experiences there. But the thing I never thought I would see is the day when the press would be so demonized in this fashion, and to the point where your fellow Americans are sort of jumping on board with this. And, you know, the vast majority of Trump supporters that have come into, you know, meeting over the course of the last few years out on the campaign trail, very fine, lovely people, wonderful to deal with. But every so often, we go to these events and we do feel, you know, that things could potentially get out of hand. And we just have to, I think, try to get back to a place where we remember that, you know, we are dealing with our fellow Americans here. You know, we can't get into a situation where the press, members of the press, are dehumanized to the extent that then anything could happen. We just can't have that.
By the way, Deb from Glenmore, Pennsylvania says, please keep on reporting the truth. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, thank you so much, Deb.
Kind. James
Wonderful.
from West Babylon, New York.
Very critical state of Pennsylvania, which, you know.
Important state.
Yeah, it's going to be again.
Yeah. James wants to know, have journalists ever been locked out of the White House briefing room except after renovations?
I don't think so. You know, we have to be out by a certain time at night or the Secret Service will lock us in. That's happened to me before.
Oh, what time at night did they kick you out?
At 10:30, you've got to be out of the... It's funny, I didn't even put this in the book, but it's kind of a funny thing. If you're not out of the White House by 10:30, they lock the doors. And there have been times where the doors have been locked and we had to go find somebody to let us out of the White House.
Let us out!
Yeah. So,
text Sarah Sanders.
Yeah, so that just goes to show you how we are putting some long hours over there from time to time. It does happen.
Gay from Milani, Hawaii. Oh, lucky.
Oh, wonderful.
Hawaii. She wants to know.
Can I do a book signing out there? We do one of these out there?
Yeah, Kauai. I'll be at the Kauai Writers Conference in November. Maybe we can get you there.
Let's do it.
She wants to know, what is your greatest hope that could actually come true during this administration? And thanks for all you do.
What is the
greatest hope for you? Like, if you had a fantasy of how things could change to make it better, what would be that fantasy?
Wow.
That's a good question. That's a hard one.
That's a tough question because I feel like she's asking a question I would ask, which is a trick question to see if I would reveal something. I appreciate the question, but I think that...
Well, I think, wouldn't it be just a kinder, gentler relationship between the administration and
I would love that.
the press?
I would love there to be a reset between this administration and the press. And, you know, I think one of the things that we should be asking these candidates during the campaign is, will you commit to not demonizing the press? As a political candidate, will you commit?
Joe Biden talked about that today.
Joe Biden talked about that.
Bryan Cranston, not that he's
right.
a political candidate, but maybe he should be at the Tony Awards.
That's right.
Stood up and said, you know, please, the press is not the enemy of the people. And that's...
Yeah.
So I think that there's a movement towards people supporting the media, understanding that there's the reason that we have a balance of power. We have 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
We have journalists. We have the First Amendment. And this book is really sort of a book that takes you deep inside what it's like to be on the front lines fighting for the right to report.
That's right. As I say, you know, we're not just here to report the news. We're here to defend the truth. And, you know, we can't have a situation where the government tells us what the truth is or what the news is. You know, I've visited places like that around the world. Those places are not the United States of America. I've been to China on a couple of occasions, and they don't have anything remotely close to the way of life that we have here, where you have freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of the press. You know, we take it for granted in this country, and we really shouldn't.
Well, maybe people will read this book and realize that we can't really take it for granted.
That's right. That's right.
Joanna from Colorado Springs, Colorado says, do you and other journalists fear that as 2020 approaches that Trump will ramp up his attacks on the press to avoid a peaceful transfer of power? Well, that would be assuming he doesn't win re-election.
You know, Michael Cohen, the president's former attorney, made some mention of that, that, you know, he's worried that if Donald Trump is beaten in 2020, he won't give up the White House. And what's interesting is, you know, at the end of the book, and I don't want to give away what's happening, you know, totally what's at the end of the book, but I talked to presidential historians, presidential scholars, and one of the quotes that really blew me away came from Larry Sabato, who works at the University of Virginia Center for Politics. And he said to me, one of his fears is that President Trump, if he's defeated, will not give up the White House. And this is somebody who's been a presidential historian at the University of Virginia for many, many years. And that struck me as a really remarkable thing to hear somebody who is a true political expert say. And so my hope is that that thought is not something that the president would ever entertain. And my guess is if we ever got into a situation like that, you would see both parties in power up on Capitol Hill say, you know what, Mr. President, it's time to go. I don't think we're going to see that situation come to pass.
No, I don't think that's going to happen at all. So Christopher from Carson City, Nevada is just saying, thank you for what you do, Jim. We have your back.
Oh, that's so nice.
So,
I appreciate it.
yes.
You know, can I just say something about that? And because I talk about this in the book. Folks really focus in on, you know, oh, Jim gets yelled at the rallies and people do this at the rallies and so on. One of the things I try to talk about in the book is how there are so many people, nice people who come up to us on a daily basis, on street corners, at the airport, train stations, supermarkets, what have you, and just thank us for what we do. And it's been one of the most gratifying experiences of this entire process. And it doesn't just happen to me, my goodness.
Well, I was with you
so
in the
many people.
Berkshires. You had given a talk up in Great Barrington, and we were going to dinner afterwards, and there was a man in the parking lot who sort of grabbed your arm and just said, keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. Turned out he was a famous actor too.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't remember who he was, but
I've been on flights and I'll wake up and this has happened a couple of times where the flight attendant will leave a note, you know, on my chest or at my seat, and it'll be from the pilot saying, keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, I like that. I'd like them to make that announcement on the plane.
Yeah,
Attention all
that's
passengers.
Right. Attention all passengers. Please respect the
buy
press.
The Enemy of the People. Go to premiercollectibles.com/Acosta. Okay, this is a great question from Donna out of Lexington, Kentucky. What do you think it'll take for the damage done by Trump to the media to be reversed, that people he's turned against mainstream media will trust them again?
I think that it's going to take some time. There's no easy answer to that. And this is one of the sobering things that I think folks need to hear is that there's already been damage done. We are now at a point where damage has been done, and it's going to take some time to come out of this. I think one of the things that will help us moving forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now is I think folks are going to watch these clips, these infamous clips that have been viral and so on, and there are going to be some supporters on the president's side who are going to say, oh my goodness, we shouldn't have been doing this. The president shouldn't have been saying the enemy of the people. He shouldn't have been calling stories that are true fake news. We can't have that kind of situation in this country, and I think that will help get us out of this mess.
I also think if people read this book and they actually get deep inside what life has been like for you day in and day out, and why it's important. For example, in Charlottesville, Virginia, after everything that went on there, you asked the president a question that led to an answer that made some very big news that in a way has sort of haunted the president to this day. Let's talk about that.
He was blaming both sides in Charlottesville.
There's good people.
And I said, Mr. President, the white supremacists and the Nazis, they started this in Charlottesville, and that's when he said, well, I think there were very fine people on both sides. Ended up being a very big gaffe for him. When he said that, I interjected and I said, well, Mr. President, there aren't any fine people in the Nazis. And as I write in the book, you know, there are not every time, but there are some times when there aren't two sides to a story. There aren't two sides to a story when it's a matter of right versus wrong. And there's no open question here about white supremacists and Nazis. They have no place in our society. And I think, you know, it's important for us to say that as journalists. You know, it's not one of those things, well, on one hand, maybe they are okay, and on the other hand, they're not. That ship has sailed. That question has been resolved.
But he did double down.
He's doubled down, he's tripled down on a lot of that stuff. He's been all over the place. And President supporters will say, well, he did go on to condemn it. And as I write in the book, well, how many tries does it take? How many times does it take for him to get it right on something as important as white supremacist violence in a major American city like Thomas Jefferson's hometown of Charlottesville, Virginia? You got to get it right the first time. You're the president.
No second chances on that one. Blaine from Valencia, California wants to know, is there something about the crazy time we're living in that has you hopeful for our future? And while you're answering, please pass me all those
here we go. We'll pass these over to you. Absolutely.
I don't want to reach over
I mean,
okay,
not to be repetitive, but one of the things that gave me hope was meeting Merlin, you know, the Trump supporter who came up to me and said, I apologize for giving you the middle finger at that Trump rally. You know, we were all obsessed with the blue wave that happened during the midterms and the House going to the Democrats. I was really just thinking about this wave of decency, as I write in the book, that came over Merlin, you know. And there's another point in the book where at another rally, a man comes up to me and he says, you know, my elderly mother, she's been out in the hot sun all day. She needs to sit down or she's going to pass out. And can anybody give us a chair? And I gave him my chair. And he came back and he said, you know, your mother raised you right. And I saw him I saw him looking back at me during the rally, and it was like, okay, I get this guy now. But the other interesting thing that he said was, he said, I saw you singing the national anthem and sang the Pledge of Allegiance back there. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought to myself, well, yes, I'm an American. I know how to sing the national anthem and say the Pledge of Allegiance. But this goes to show you what we've been through in the press corps, is that they've gone after us so much, he's gone after us so much, that it's convinced some people that we're not patriotic Americans.
Right. I mean, you don't have to be wearing a flagged pin to know the words to the national anthem. I mean, that's just...
Right, and we all love our country, and we want the best thing for our kids.
But also, as the son of a Cuban immigrant, what's been going on right now with the immigration crisis, which has reached a boiling point multiple times while you've been writing this book? How does that really hit home for you?
Well, you know, I talk about this in the book. My dad's a Cuban immigrant, and when he came over to this country, you know, he tells me the story about this Presbyterian church in Northern Virginia that gave my dad and my grandmother coats and warm clothing because they had never experienced winter before. It doesn't get cold in Cuba. Right. It doesn't snow there. And that has always stayed with me, you know, and the teacher in his elementary school that pulled him aside to teach him English. You know, I call my dad one of the original dreamers, you know, because when he came over, there weren't a whole lot of Latinos running around in Northern Virginia.
That's for sure.
You know, but my dad over the years has always instilled in me, you know, a belief that, you know, we're all in this together and that immigrants help build this country too. And, you know, the Statue of Liberty here in New York City reminds me of that all the time. And as I talk about in the book, you know, Stephen Miller, who works for the president, and I had that, some people call it a debate, but a conversation or a back and forth in the briefing room about the true meaning of the Statue of Liberty. And when Stephen Miller said, well, it's not about immigration, I just couldn't believe my ears. I had been raised believing that the Statue of Liberty was about welcoming refugees and immigrants to this country. So, and as I point out, you know, if you go to the Statue of Liberty website, it says there right on the website, the immigrant statue. So, you know, I told Stephen that day, I said, I think you're engaging in some national park revisionism. You know, I think it's an important thing to remember that we were, you know, we do live in a country that was built by immigrants, you know, built by all of us.
And, you know, just a couple of final thoughts before we end this fantastic one-on-one. You are you're an extraordinarily good writer, I guess, because you've practiced writing every single day for TV.
Yeah.
Was it hard to write hundreds of pages, and how did you get that done while simultaneously flying around the world covering the president?
Working in the mornings before I go in, late at night.
Hats off to Matt Harper, who is the executive editor who actually edited the pages.
The editor, Matt Harper, was terrific during all of this. You know, I was on planes, you know, with the little privacy screen on my laptop so people couldn't see what I was writing, you know, sitting at the gate before my flight. For those long flights that we take on overseas trips and whatnot. So I've had, you know, weekends and so on. I've had time to write it. It's been an amazing experience. You know, I don't know if I told you this, Lisa, but one of the things that was interesting about this experience, at the end of it, I didn't want to stop writing. I wanted to keep going.
Keep going, because, you know, let's see.
But Matt was like, it's time to stop, you know.
Well, I always say at the very end, it's always sort of, I think I said this to you, it's like, put down the pencil, the test is over.
That's right, that's right. But it was an amazing experience, and it helped me, I think, you know, I wanted to tell this story. I wanted to get this out there. I wanted folks to have an appreciation for what we do, because we can't just let these attacks go unanswered. You know, as reporters, our instinct is, and this is how I was raised, not to be part of the story, and not say to the president, no, Mr. President, you're wrong, or no, Mr. President, that's false. But I think we've been thrust into this position where we do have to defend ourselves a little bit and tell our side of the story. And I hope that's what I've done.
Well, this is a really amazing book, and just want to shake your hand.
Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you so much for writing it.
Thanks for all your help.
PremierCollectibles.com//Acosta. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Share this widely with everyone you know. We got to spread the word. We got to make sure to hold truth to power.
And buy the book.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.